Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching India's World with me, Frank Rausam Pereira. India and the UK on December 15th resolved to fast-track discussions on a trade deal as well as concluding a comprehensive migration and mobility partnership agreement, a move that comes in the backdrop of Britain looking at ways to offset adverse financial implications of its exit from the European Union. During talks between External Affairs Minister Jaishankar and visiting British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, the two sides discussed ways to further deepen trade and investment ties as well as to hasten post-COVID-19 economic recovery. At a joint press conference with Jaishankar, Raab exuded confidence of firming up an enhanced trade partnership next year, which he said could be a stepping stone towards a future free trade agreement. In a statement, the Ministry of External Affairs said both sides recognize the importance of fast-tracking the discussions on a trade deal to tap the full potential of bilateral trade and economic relations. In the wake of Brexit, the UK has been looking at ramping up trade cooperation with leading economies like India. In this edition of India's World, we will analyze the status of India-UK ties. Joining me on the program today are Jitendranath Mishra, former ambassador, Harshvi Pant, Head Strategic Studies, Observer Research Foundation, and Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Editor of the Hindustan Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, let me begin the program with you first. Let's first understand and analyze the key takeaways really from your perspective as far as the UK's Foreign Secretary's visit to India was concerned.
Well, the timing was occasioned by the coming visit of the UK Prime Minister to be the chief guest at Republic Day. So it was a preparatory visit to start with for the coming visit of the Prime Minister. So all issues on the table were discussed threadbare. I believe there were more than 4 hours of discussions. And I think the most important outcome of this was for the UK to tilt towards the Asia Pacific, as they call it. And in that sense, this was the first visit that India hosted of a foreign minister after the COVID pandemic. That itself is of symbolic importance. And the Prime Minister's visit will also be the first official bilateral visit after the COVID pandemic. So there is a lot of symbolism in this, but it's much more than symbolism. Trade, investment, cooperation in the context of COVID and Asia Pacific and culture and science and technology, and everything is on the table. And as far as trade is concerned, it's been underwhelming, about 15 to 16 billion US dollars a year. And the UK doesn't really figure among the top trade partners of India. And there is discussion about a trade deal, as you mentioned, Frank, and FTA. But FTAs are being questioned across the spectrum in India, as you know. And we know what happened to the regional comprehensive economic partnership and also the experience of FTAs with the ASEAN countries and others. So are the benefits commensurate with the potential? So that's the big question. And I don't think the FTA is going to happen in a hurry. But certainly as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, that's going to be one of the major takeaways. And of course, India, along with South Korea as well as Australia, has been invited. Our Prime Minister has been invited by Prime Minister Johnson for the G7 in the summer of 2021. Now, there is some kind of talk and speculation that this will be a D10 or Democracy 10. Well, whether it will be a Democracy 10 and where does China come into that equation? So these are some of the major issues that were discussed during this meeting, but we'll have to take it from there. Investment, of course, is far more promising, and India is the third largest investor in the UK, and the UK is the fourth largest investor in India. So that has much more potential going forward. But the timing of the visit is very important in these very difficult times. And of course, there is the Oxford vaccine also, the AstraZeneca vaccine, and there's discussion about that. And India has been termed the pharmacy capital of the world, the pharmacy of the world.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of things to look forward to as far as the ties between India and the UK are concerned. Let's focus a little bit on the trade aspect of it, because That's where the most headlines were grabbed, really. So, Pramit, let me come across to you now. As far as the trade deal is concerned, what contours do you see the trade deal taking? And what's it likely to be like? And what are the key focus areas going to be between India and the UK as far as trade is concerned?
The Indian government would like to have a early harvest agreement. They really want to have a small. The preference is, given India's difficulties in doing FTAs generally, is to focus on a small agreement in which they'll do services, data policies or data regulatory issues, immigration, as you mentioned, and bundle those together. These are ones that are politically easy for India to do and are considered popular within the larger populace. And thus, unlike things like manufactured goods and agriculture, which tend to be contentious and cause strong reactions inside. So the view, I think, is that the Boris Johnson government, given that it seems to be heading for a very hard Brexit, is looking for non-EU trade agreements to be able to show politically that Britain can live or can succeed without a close relationship with the European Union. They've already done FTAs with Japan and Korea. It'd be great for them to have India on board. They can't get fast agreements with China and the United States. They're other two biggest trade partners outside of Europe. India would like this in part, I would argue, because they are looking at similar FTAs, small FTAs, if you wish, with the United States and some other countries. And if they can get one with Britain, then it provides a template for their negotiations with potentially the Biden administration or other countries. Particularly the inclusion of immigration, which is something we've never been able to get into a free trade agreement, is something I think that would be of politically very useful for India to be able to get popular support for an agreement. But trade is not something India does well, and our Commerce Ministry is a bit of a dinosaur, I would argue, in terms of its capacities and willingness to do these type of things. So we'll see how that plays out. Britain, while it may want an FTA, and there is strong political pressure within the British government to get something done with India, would be wary of doing an agreement in which all of India's agenda is done, but then worry that sometime later a follow-up agreement which would incorporate some of the issues, for example, tariffs on whiskey or gin, which the British have been pushing for quite some time, are simply not touched at all. So we'll see where that goes. But I think some sort of an economic understanding, there is at least a stronger than normal desire by both capitals to get something done.
Absolutely. I think there is the desire to get something done, and that's something that we'll focus on. Harshvi Pant, let's not forget with Brexit and all that's happening there, of course, clearly the UK is looking for new partners. Britain wants to get something done and move forward really and try and show its people as well that they can do without the EU, like Pramit was just pointing out. So that may just push both Britain especially to go ahead and ensure that this trade deal is actually signed.
Yes, absolutely. I think, the circumstances have never been this favorable for any kind of a trade deal. If at all it has to happen, it has to happen now. Both sides have strong incentives to deliver. And there is a sense, as you point out, in Britain, that they need to showcase their ability to have these sorts of trade deals done, because, there are question marks about British role post-Brexit. There are question marks about, in fact, Mr. Johnson's ability to govern. There is a lot of chaos in the system, and so there are bigger questions which I think which sort of pervade the British system at the moment, and there is a lot of desire to showcase their ability to deliver on at least some of the contentious issues. And India, a small deal with India, as Pramit was pointing out, is perhaps one way of signaling that they mean business, that they can live without Europe, that the idea of global Britain, that Britain exists as a major player on the world stage, even outside the European Union. That narrative which Mr. Johnson and his administration embodies, is very, very significant. And that narrative is what is driving Britain towards its Indo-Pacific policy, towards this idea of a global Britain, which is a post-Brexit British foreign policy. All these elements coming together, trying to frame a response to the present predicament that Britain faces, perhaps allow this possibility to emerge of a trade deal. But again, there are issues on the table which are very contentious, and I think still needs to be resolved. But the push that is coming out, the political symbolism of it, in the sense of Mr. Johnson coming at the Republic Day celebrations, I think all of that underscore that there is a real desire that the two sides are willing to spend political capital on this. And I think this larger sense that Britain is looking for a role in the Indo-Pacific, with its new Indo-Pacific policy architecture being put in place. And I'm sure there's going to be a report very, very soon. The strategic review is underway. And that puts Britain squarely, and that would put Britain squarely in the Indo-Pacific realm. And there, the ability to navigate the transition that is happening there away from China. And some of the suggestions that have come in about, this conclusion that Britain needs this deal with India. And of course, India would argue that this is a good time to have this early harvest deal with Britain, because otherwise it becomes just too challenging politically. So I think the political cap is being spent on it. So so I think both sides are hopeful about a deal.
Right.
But
All right.
As we know, when it comes to trade, it's taken at the last minute.
Absolutely. Okay, taking the discussion forward now, let's focus a little bit on the Indo-Pacific. Ambassador, as far as the UK is concerned, what's at stake for them as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, and what is likely to happen there, and how can India and Britain really, further cooperate in the Indo-Pacific?
Oh, absolutely. Britain, as far as Britain is concerned, the tilt, as they call it, towards the Indo-Pacific is clear, and India is the partner of choice in that tilt. And India is the privileged partner, so to say. Don't forget that Britain has had problems regarding Hong Kong, with China, major problems, 5G. There's been certain kinds of moves by Britain regarding 5G and Huawei. And so therefore, from Britain's point of view, it's more partnerships in a post-Brexit world, simple. So they're looking for partners, and what better than emerging powers to the east, such as India. As far as India is concerned also, we need to increase our options. We know the problems going on with China, and we need options beyond the United States. We don't want to put all our eggs, as far as security is concerned, in the same basket with the United States or even in Quad. But when we talk about the Indo-Pacific, we also have to remember that it's still a nebulous concept. It's still a loose concept. For example, the Indo-Pacific strategy of India's major partners, the US, the UK, France, Germany now, from Europe, and of course, the UK doesn't want to be left behind. That's another important point to make. If France and Germany are now, they have preempted the UK in the Indo-Pacific, the UK still sees itself as a consequential global power, a P5, with nuclear capability, and therefore they want to have that kind of profile in the world. Now, but what's the reality? I think it has more symbolic, psychological, political value rather than strategic or military value. The Indian Navy, there's, I think, an emerging consensus that the Indian Navy, does it have the capability to project actual hard power all across the Indo-Pacific? The answer is probably no. Now, if India does not have the capability, what is the point of having so many military logistics agreements signed with various partners? And there is now discussion about such an agreement being concluded with the UK. The only one in the public domain is, of course, the one we signed with Japan. And what does it actually say? It gives indicators of what we might have signed with the US and others, Baker and others. Now, it doesn't say much. Does it commit Japan to help India if push comes to shove with China? No, it doesn't. And Prime Minister Abe made it very clear, for example, that Japan will not commit to wars on behalf of other countries or conflicts on behalf of other countries, even if the pacifist elements of the constitutions have been modified. So therefore, this has more symbolic value than actual value. And of course, it keeps China guessing to a certain extent about intentions. For example, the Queen Elizabeth next year will be heading a naval task force into the Indo-Pacific. Now, that's geographically and conceptually a change as far as British force projection is concerned. But we'll have to wait and see how this goes forward. And I think linked to the Indo-Pacific is also the D10, what is called the D10, the Democracy 10. Now, is it going to be a concert of democracies against China? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to work. China has many important partners who have great stakes in continuing cooperation with China. And if we make it just democracies, what happens to the countries, for example, in the Gulf? They are not democracies, they are monarchies. They have been very important partners. Are we going to drive them away from, by forming a concert of democracies, drive them away from this coalition? No, I don't think it's going to be that easy. So while these are projections and groupings in the making, they are very far from being hard power realities.
Right. So, Pramit, let me bring you in here. There is no doubt that UK, the rest of Europe and democracies around the world are clearly concerned about China's aggression, especially in the Indo-Pacific. Can we expect more like-minded countries to come together? We saw that the Quad was elevated this year in 2020 as well. More likely, more like-minded countries coming on board in the Indo-Pacific to take on China in 2021?
Well, the point is that what do you mean by taking on China? One of the issues that you have with a country the size and economic power of China is that different countries are prepared to resist China, if you wish, but only at a certain level or in certain sectors. So your game is to basically have all of these uneven positions coalesce into something more or less, should we say, aimed at China, but will have differing bits and pieces. This is true even within the Quad, where there remains some deep differences between the members as to what exactly the Quad and how the Quad responds to China. The military aspect is probably the most difficult. Very few countries have the military capacity to take on China, which is why the United States is absolutely important to any real anti-Chinese coalition that glues all of them together, and is the only country that has genuine capacity that stretches all the way from the northern Pacific all the way into the Indian Ocean. Japan, for example, probably has a better navy technologically than China, but it does not have the blue water capacity to go beyond a certain level, basically beyond the Pacific. The same thing for India. We don't have the naval capacity to go beyond much more than the Straits of Malacca, at least at present. So the game is to bring in as many members as you can, and then slowly over time, slowly see if you can evolve a consensus. So Britain has been an interesting introduction because they have decided that to show at least that they are no longer just a European power and focused only on what happens in that area. They have offered to join the new Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, the CPTPP. They've signed, they're trying to see if they can come to a fifth generation fighter agreement with the Japanese. As mentioned, they've done an FTA already with a number of Asian countries, and they're looking to do so with us. They want to maintain an aircraft carrier task force, the only one they have, in at least one of them, should I say, in the Pacific Ocean. They've also rebuilt their base in Bahrain so that they maintain a certain Indian Ocean capacity. So you can see the British are trying. The game is that they recognize that they can only be part of a larger set of components. France is a genuine Indian Ocean player. It has a naval position. It has about 1 million French citizens living in the Indian Ocean. They also have a physical presence in the Pacific Ocean. Germany, I think, we'll see whether Germany has the capacity particularly given its incredibly strong economic relationships with China, to be able to go beyond a certain point, and their own deep reluctance to go down the military path. But you're really looking at other countries in the region, like Indonesia in particular, Vietnam, and so on, that you really want to bring into this broader coalition. So this is going to be the building of an anti-Chinese coalition in the Indo-Pacific will be an evolutionary process in which you will have different, so you say, paths for each country, and slowly come together, hopefully on a consensus, bit by bit, in different areas: economics, technology, military, and so on. And what's really helping them, more than anything else, is the behavior of China itself. China has been the primary driver for all of this, simply because of its aggressive and so-called wolf warrior diplomatic activities.
Right. So, Harshipant, of what strategic importance is UK to India and vice versa?
Well, UK, part of it has been that UK has always, in some ways, done more than what its capacities would tell us about UK. Punching above their weight in global affairs. It's part of UN Security Council, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and it has had a kind of a global profile that few countries which have those kinds of capabilities can actually match. So in that sense, having UK as a partner is not that bad. But I think what has happened in the relationship is often the relationship had been subsumed by our historical grievances, by some of the challenges that we had faced with Britain when it comes to countries like Pakistan. There have been many in India who have always believed that Britain has been more sympathetic to Pakistani causes than to India's approach on issues of terrorism or extremism. We have had issues, for example, even till recently, the issue of China was very complex, and Britain, as you would recall, till last year was allowing China and Huawei into 5G network. It was only earlier this year that they decided, that they don't want Chinese Huawei into the system, and that is also again debatable how extensively they are, they have banned the Chinese from their networks. So clearly, in a sense, there have been complexities in the engagement, but a lot of that engagement that India and the UK has been looking at the past, and I think what perhaps. In the recent decades, we have seen a lot of effort being put in from the British side in reaching out to India. We have seen successive prime ministers coming almost on a regular basis to India, and there was a lot of discontent that no Indian prime minister was, for decades had gone to the UK. So Mr. Modi's outreach to UK had been quite substantive. If you look at it in the recent context, he has gone there twice, 2015 and 2018, and signaling clearly that India is now willing to build a relationship with Britain that is more forward-looking, and that is about the 21st century issues and how Britain and India can really map out each other's and help each other in mapping out the challenges of the century, whether it is the future of work, whether it's education, whether it's urbanization, all those sorts of contemporary issues where the focus has been. And that, I think, has allowed the relationship to evolve in a direction where some of the more difficult issues like trade, like the strategic postures of the two countries can be discussed more openly. And there has been greater convergence as Britain has decided to move away from Europe towards the Indo-Pacific, towards the Asian periphery, where it thinks that it needs to play a role beyond Europe. So that convergence had allowed for this possibility to emerge of a partnership that is really strategic. A partnership that can really talk about what perhaps the two countries can do in the realm of technology evolution, what they can do in multilateral platforms, the fact that India is going to be a member of the UN Security Council from January 2021 next month, I think also allows that possibility of greater convergence between the two countries on multilateral platforms, on global issues. So I think all of that perhaps leads us to conclude that there are greater possibilities which in the past have not been really optimally used. And now perhaps the time is right, given the strategic evolution of the global order, that the two countries can really sit together and work out a roadmap for their relationship of the next decade or so.
Absolutely. All right, time to get quick closing comments now from all my panelists with the best way forward. Starting first with you, Ambassador.
as the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said to the BBC, we will not brush issues under the carpet. He mentioned human rights, but we will not allow these issues to affect the overall tenor of the relationship. I think that's the key point in the way forward. As my colleagues on the panel have already pointed out, there are complex issues from history. But we have to also look to the future, and it's going in a pragmatic direction, less of nostalgia, less of history. For example, the Indian diaspora, 1.5 million, and 1.8% of the population, but contribute 6% of the GDP in the UK. So it's a very significant factor. Now, there are problems. What are the problems? I'll repeat. Pakistan will always be an issue, and I will bring in the Pakistani diaspora as a domestic determinant of politics domestically, and therefore they will have influence on foreign policy because for the simple reason of democracy and votes. And that's not going to go away. That's going to remain a constant in the relationship. So the UK can do so much and no more. The three issues that the UK is very much going to be affected by, I think, are first of all, the health pandemic. Secondly, the US-China competition. And thirdly, post-Brexit. So these are the key issues in the few years ahead. And where does India fit into it? Can India help the UK? India can help to a certain extent, but I hesitate to say that there is a fundamental breakthrough in the relationship. Some issues from the past will remain. I mentioned the G7 and the D10, and it's not going to work beyond a point. Thank you.
Ramit?
So, India has, I would argue, and partly based on what I've had conversations within the government, three transformational relationships, which is the United States, Japan, and increasingly now the United Arab Emirates, countries that India has not just friendly relations, but countries that are prepared to do enough to change the very trajectory of Indian growth and capacity over time, and see that they have an interest in doing so. What we are now presently seeing that as Britain breaks off from the European Union, we're exploring the possibility of whether Britain could become the fourth such country, and whether Britain really has both the stomach, the capacity, or otherwise to do that and play that kind of a role.
Right. And Harshvi Pant, close the show for us with your concluding remark.
I think, Britain, as it looks for a new role in the global order, India, it will find in India, it has found in India perhaps a partner that it can work with. It can work together to shape the future trajectory of the Indo-Pacific, perhaps. But I think there are enough issues on the table which needs to be sorted out first. But the start has been made, and the Prime Minister's 2 visits to UK have been a signal that India is willing and ready to take on some of those difficult issues and move a relationship from the past, perhaps to the realities of the 21st century.
All right. On that note, then, I'll call it a wrap on this edition of India's World. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the UK's Foreign Secretary's visit was a timely one, and there is a political will really on both sides to enhance ties between the two countries. India would look to get mini trade deals done and push the non-contentious issues through. It is the most favorable time to to get a trade deal done right now because of Brexit and so many other things happening around the world. Britain's Indo-Pacific tilt is clear, and India is the partner of choice in the region, so expect something to happen there. And let's not forget that there is great potential between the two countries to take this relationship to new heights, and we may just see that happening in 2021. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.